to just introduce Courtney and myself. We are with Student Support and Wellness Services at Baltimore City Community College. We are the counseling center here, and Roxanne is also, she is a graduate intern from the University of Maryland, Baltimore, studying social work, and she's graduating in a couple months, so we're very excited for her. So today we're going to talk about adventure-based learning principles and how to create more self-awareness. Let me see what's next on mine. So really quickly, we'll go over what the learning objectives are. So hopefully by the time you get out of here, you'll have your own personal tutorial on being able to explain the basic principles of adventure-based counseling techniques. You'll also be able to explain how to structure and process an adventure-based activity. And I forgot, Courtney, you were supposed to be doing this.
Yeah.
You want to continue on the third one?
Oh my gosh, you guys aren't going to believe this, but it just, when I went to go, it says a green button that says share screen, but when I went just now to share my screen, it says the same thing that you were told, host disabled. But I can at least look at it. I can.
Okay,
I can
so then
see.
that's good. You can look at it.
Yeah.
You can follow along.
Yeah.
So Courtney, you want to explain?
We're on slide 3 currently.
The last two.
Okay.
Yes. So we will also, we will try to engage in one or explain one adventure-based activity. And we will be able to identify ways to utilize adventure-based programming across various areas of health and organization.
So I will say that when we applied to present, it was going to be in person. And so it's really hard to do adventure-based learning over Zoom. We do have an activity that we can try to play even with a small group, but please know that this is more for experiential learning. You really want to be able to interact with people. You want to be able to touch things. You want to be able to move around. And so we'll talk a little bit about how to do that. So adventure-based counseling is designed as experiential group activities where participants are given challenges through the intentional use of metaphors, creating therapeutic connections. So really what we do is when we set up a group, and there's tons of different initiatives or activities that you can do. And so you load it with your participants by giving them the directions and not much more, because you want them to struggle. And so it's intentionally trying to get them to be confused and, oh, what am I doing? And because we want them to problem solve, we want them to really kind of struggle, because there's struggle in that growth. And so that's really important as you kind of set up these activities.
I'm wondering if you guys set this whole thing with not being able to share the PowerPoint up just so that I could experience this.
But I'm struggling too, and I don't want to struggle right now. But yes, but there's a learning thing with all of that too. And that's something that we can really take from this adventure-based counseling is like, okay, where is this struggle and what can you learn from it, and what can you, how can you apply it to your real life, and how can you put it going forward? Oh, you're muted, Courtney. I can hear you through the wall, but I don't think Maggie can.
we do have thin walls. We want to go over some valuable experiences that you can get out of adventure-based counseling. So one is the opportunity to possibly spend time outdoors. So that's not a requirement to participate in these activities, but it's a great way, if you have the space time, whether to get people outside. So I know before the pandemic, it was a good way to get students on campus outside, give them the ability to play. Everybody loves to play. And just having, a lighthearted experience that's learning based, and being a part of a team. Cooperative learning is kind of what I was just explaining, where you have the opportunity to, learn together and struggle together, which builds that learning. Hello, just want to say hi.
Oh, hi.
We're a small group, so might as well introduce ourselves. Hi, can you hear me?
Everyone, I'm Sam Hilario. I'm with
Hi.
you.
Oh,
Where are you from? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
United Way.
Oh, great.
oh,
Welcome.
okay. Well, yes, welcome. So we're going over adventure-based counseling. And so we're talking about some valuable experiences, building community, which can be very important post-pandemic, just having that opportunity to be social, be together, and whatever it is, and not that post-pandemic, but like whatever the new normal is for you and how you view that. And just the ability and opportunity to have fun. So some of the therapeutic values that are tied to it is reframing. Oh, I just realized that Sam, you can't see, but okay. Well, we're going over something that you can't see, but
So
you can
Sam,
just look it up.
where somehow the hosts are not able to share our PowerPoint. If you would like, you can put your email address in the chat and I'll send you the PowerPoint so you can like follow along if that's something that you're interested in.
Okay. Sorry, I just had that realization, like, oh, she's just staring at us. No problem. So reframing, problem solving, self-reflecting, emotional regulation, fostering responsibility, being able to accept help, building empathy, destigmatization. So that meaning, everybody has their own opinions and level of understanding with mental health. So it kind of tricks people into talking about mental health and how important it is and how intertwined it is in our daily living.
And I think like I want to say about that, if you don't mind me interrupting, Courtney, is like Courtney said, you have to kind of trick them in. There's so much stigma around mental health that at BCCC, that's something that we have done really well is gone into the classrooms and they don't know really why I'm there. And then I have them do this adventure-based activity and they, at first, they're like, what is this? And I make them get out of their, seats and all this stuff. And then we really do kind of trick them into talking about mental health because things that they do will trigger, oh, well, how can you relate this to real life? That's like the number one question I always ask when we kind of process the activity. And you notice things, and we'll talk about that in a minute too, but it's really a good way to, if you are with a crowd that is not very interested and in talking about mental health or comfortable about it, you can kind of be suave as how you get there. Got it, Maggie, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for that. And like I was just saying, increasing social skills, which can also be tied to, this post-pandemic new normal. For a while, we were staring at each other on the computer and the house was only our family or only with ourselves. So that just instinctively provided some like social anxiety getting back outside. So it will be a good way once we are outside or whatever community or group you may participate in with this will be helpful. Okay, so this you definitely may want to see, but you can explain, Angela.
Sure. So there is a certain model called the experiential learning model, and it is through David Kolb, and he came up with this model probably in the early 80s. And really, if you could see, there's kind of three tiers. There's a do, a reflect, and an apply. So the first one is the do, which is the experience. It's, trying to figure it out. It's performing the activity, it's participating. And that's what the play is, right? The actual doing of the activity is the play. But in order for you to take some principles to gain more self-awareness, you really want to be able to reflect upon it. And so you would use different processing questions. You would ask what they're observing, what do they see happen. You might talk about their feelings throughout the whole experience. You might want to have them analyze anything that they were seeing or feeling or doing. And then you want to kind of apply it. And that's where it comes in with like, okay, well, how can you relate this to real life? And the beauty of the experiential learning is they bring to you, the processing, they bring to you what they need. So you might want to come in with an agenda and say, well, I'm going to talk about this today. And you can, organize your questions in a way that leads them there. Or you can completely leave it up to them and say, okay, well, how can you relate this to your life? And somebody might talk about, oh, when I was pregnant as a teenager, and it might go completely in a direction you didn't necessarily expect, but is what they need and is what they kind of connect with. Or you have a little bit of both. And that's really when we do this with our students at BCCC, it's a little bit of both. I kind of have a direction of where they should be going, but I need to make sure they connect with it. So they definitely bring me the things that they connect with. And that's really the best part of this is they take it where they need to do. Thank you so much, Maggie. Appreciate that. So really, the experiential learning style is like the framework to differentiate it between just play or more meaningful, intentional kind of reflecting and applying to real life. And so a really easy way to think about this is what, so what, now what? So when you think about it, it's like, what did you do? Describe the event. So what? What are the implications? How do you make sense of the facts? Now what? What's your course of action? What are you going to take away from this activity to kind of apply? And so then the processing. So the processing is the way to reflect upon that experience. And so there's tons of different processing questions that you can use to kind of get them to see where they want to be. So this is where the observations come in. This is where their feelings are. This is where they analyze. This is how they relate the experience to real life. And what are some of these ideas that you can take and apply for growth? And so there's tons of different kinds of processing questions. Like, I'm just going to throw out a couple, right? How effective was the group at problem solving during this initiative? So it gets them to kind of stop and say, like, was somebody making all the decisions? And why did you decide to be the leader? And why did you decide to follow along? And what's good about following along? Because, we're always all about leaders, but we need followers. And so that can be, discussed. And that's an easy kind of like team building. A lot of people look at some of this stuff as team building, but we can go deeper and further than just a team building activity. So simple things like, can you name a feeling that you had during the activity? When you felt this way, how did you behave? So connecting the feelings with the behaviors. When we think about mental health is how we're feeling, which translates into how we're thinking, which translates into our behaviors. And so you can easily ask some of these questions like, well, when you felt annoyed at the leader, how did you behave? And then get them to say, oh, I kind of step back and just let them do whatever they wanted, Okay, do you do that other times in your life? How is that beneficial to you? How is that holding you back? So you really want to kind of think about important questions. You could talk about communication styles. You could talk about, personal growth. How could you challenge yourself to improve and grow? Some activities, you do an activity, and then you give them an opportunity to do it after you process it. And so then you see, okay, well, we did the activity once, then we talked about it, we analyzed it, we processed it. Now let's do it again and see what we learned. And then we can talk about, kind of personal growth with that kind of stuff. You can do things like diversity issues. You could talk about how maybe people were different from other people in the group. What instances did being different help the group or hinder the group? Or is it important to consider people's individual experiences when you're trying to come up with a plan? So there's so many different ways that you can use processing questions to make it more meaningful and not just be the play, not just be the team building, but have it really be centered upon what is important in their own lives. So we're going to try the game. Sam came in late, but I want to mention that adventure-based learning or counseling is not to be done over Zoom. When we first applied to be part of Healing City, we were under the impression that it was outside, and I think they changed it once they had Omicron. And so we had this great activity for you to actually do and problem solve. However, because we are over Zoom, we were really trying to think of something that we could all do as a group. And Courtney and I will also participate in this. She's going to read you the directions.
I might, because I don't have the new PowerPoint.
Oh, okay. I will read the directions.
Yeah.
I forgot. All right, let me just read them straight. Now, that's one thing when you do try to take on an activity, you want to read the directions straight. You generally want the directions written down so they can go back and refer to it. And if they ask you questions, you've got the directions right there. Oh, there are the directions. You don't want to give more. That's one of the hardest parts about being a facilitator with some of this stuff, because you know how it's supposed to happen. And so when they ask you a question, you don't want to give anything away. The whole point is for them to struggle and then figure it out and feel good about figuring it out. So always just say, if they ask you questions, oh, you can refer back to the directions. You have the directions right there. The directions are on the screen, however you want to do it. So here are your directions. The goal is to have this group count to 10. You must keep your camera off at all times. You cannot say anything except to say a number. Only one person can say a number at the same time. You cannot say a consecutive number. And if more than one person talks at a time, the whole group must start over. So would you like me to read that again? Because we can't put that on the screen. I'll read it one more time.
Angela, I just put it in the chat, actually.
Oh, great. Okay.
Thanks.
So if you want, it is slide 8. Yes, I think you got slide 8. The only thing that's different, because my PowerPoint was not responding, the only thing different in the one that you have is, it might be slide 9. If you have a slide 9 that says Zen counting, that's the right. Do you have that? I don't know which version you got when I tried to send it. Slide 9 should say Zen counting at the top. If it's not slide 9, then you have the wrong one. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's the one.
Okay. That's the perfect. Thank you so much. So you can look at the chat, because these are the right directions here. You can look at the chat, but I'm going to shut off my camera. And let's see. Everyone should shut off their camera. I'm trying to follow the directions, people.
One,
2, 3,
4,
5. Oh, we have to start over. We did it at the same time. All right, let's start over again.
1,
2,
3,
4,
5,
6,
7,
8,
9,
10.
All right. I was just about to say it, Courtney, when you did. All right, you can put your videos back on. All right. Hi, Jessica. I see you popped in. It's nice to see you.
Hi, Angela.
Okay. So I'm not sure when you got in, Jessica, but recognizing that adventure-based counseling is not really done on Zoom. This is the one way to, this was the one activity that we felt like, okay, maybe we can try to do. And you guys did a good job, because it only took 2 rounds. And when you think about this simple activity, And usually if I do this, it's used as an icebreaker, right? This is not the full-fledged activity. But what can you get from this activity? What did you see happening?
I think starting to learn a rhythm.
And how did that rhythm help?
I mean, I think for me, it was a little, I mean, I think it's hard to sort of, you don't want to step on somebody else's toes. And so one way that I was like, okay, well, there's like sort of a window of time after which you're afraid that somebody else might be speaking too. So at one point I was like, if I go right on the heels of the person before me, then maybe it'll be before somebody else decides to speak, and I won't have to worry about, whether or not I'd be, speaking at the same time as them. But there's so much sort of, you realize too how much is said and communicated visually versus verbally that you don't have access to.
Exactly. Yeah. So you touched on a lot of things there. So you touched on the communication where we couldn't see each other, and that makes it more difficult. If I was doing this in the room with you, I would have people close their eyes. I still do not want them to see each other because you can give clues, you can give a wink, you can, give some kind of sign, I'm going to do 3, or 2 or whatever. And so you want to cut off that communication because that's where part of that struggle is, right? And so you came up with some really good things. It's like, I don't want to step on anybody's toes. So how often do we kind of pull back because we want to make sure that, everything's okay. And, we're, sometimes we're respecting other people, but sometimes it's also like, maybe I'm tentative because I don't know what they're going to think when I go ahead. Does anyone want to add to that?
Yeah, I know for me, I took several seconds before after someone spoke, before I went. And I think I typically do that naturally. I think part of it is so I have time to think about how I want to respond. But also it's not natural for me to take initiative, even though I do. It's not something that's just typical of me. So I'm kind of the opposite of Maggie, where Maggie, you were kind of like, you would jump right after someone went. I kind of waited and was like, okay, now I'm ready to go. So.
Which is really good, because when you think about communication, it's important to know what's best for us. And so sometimes people need a kind of a moment to kind of process, like, how do I want to respond? And sometimes people are so quick to respond that they don't even have it all together yet. And they're kind of maybe saying stuff that isn't going to be helpful to them. So it's important to kind of look at that. But it's interesting because, Roxanne, if I remember correctly, the first time we did it, I didn't say go. And I think you were the first one to go, and we sat there for what felt like 5 minutes. But it was only, maybe 30 seconds. But did you start it off?
Were you
the one that started off?
But I was still counting, let me count 5 seconds and then jump in.
But what made you in that moment, because you're someone that doesn't always take that initiative, what made you in that moment say, okay, this is awkward and weird, I'm just going to say a number?
I think because I do have that thought of, this is awkward and weird, but let's kind of just get to it. And then maybe it might make someone feel better that, because I'm feeling that way, maybe someone else is feeling that way. So let me just start it off and then kind of get my nervousness out the way.
Oh,
yeah.
So you actually kind of recognize that probably everyone's feeling the same way I am. So let me just kind of go for it. Oh, excellent. Okay, thank you so much. I think sometimes when we have that empathy, or we have that kind of awareness that other people might be struggling just like we are, I mean, that's why groups are often really effective, is because they can, people realize, oh, I'm not alone in thinking this way. And that's why they're powerful, and learning from each other is so important.
Great. Angela, also to that point, I just would want to ask the group, what was it like to not take initiative, or what were the reasons for not taking the initiative?
Well, I think I mean, personally, I didn't want to screw it up for everybody if I did take initiative and I spoke at the same time as somebody else. then I would be like setting the clock back to 0 for everybody, and I'd be like, I'd feel responsible.
Mhm.
I'm a pretty shy person. I'm more comfortable starting things off if I'm second or third. So both rounds I said number 3 because that's where I felt comfortable to jump in.
Perfect. Again, knowing yourself creates that awareness of, okay, when in life am I going to step in? When do I need to observe first before I'm comfortable? And then sometimes people are never comfortable too. And then, we could also talk about that as like, okay, there are some places in your life where you are more comfortable. What can you get from that to maybe grow in other areas as well? Thank you so much, Sam. A lot of times when I do this, I used to do this with my middle schoolers, and they were like, 1, 2, 3, they were trying to do it so fast, and they must have messed up. I mean, I remember one time I felt like I was doing it for half an hour, and then I'm like, are they still want to do this anymore? Like I don't, but part of it was, like, what are you learning from the next go around? And so that's really a big thing with adventure-based is like, really, what are you taking from this experience? And so that group in particular had a really hard time learning anything from round to round, and it was taking forever. And then we all felt like giving up. No, we didn't. We successfully did it, but it took forever. But then that's what we say is like, when what they're bringing, and then you say, okay, well, I see that you kind of all jump in and you kind of all do it at the same time, and we all have to start over, and then you start blaming each other. So sometimes you have to stop and say, okay, if they're struggling so much that you feel like you're not going to get through it, that's when you might say, okay, I will let you ask me one question. And I'm not guaranteeing I'm going to answer that question. So really think about what kind of question that you're going to ask, come up together in a consensus. And then actually, I don't even say come up with a consensus. I just say it because usually the leader will just ask a question, and then I'll say, oh, is that the only question that the group wants to ask? And then everyone's like, no, that's not the question, and all that stuff. And so sometimes you have to recognize when a activity is starting to run off the rails. Is like, okay, how do you kind of bring them back in? Why do you think you are struggling with this over and over again? What do you see happening? And so they can say, oh, well, I wanted this, or I want, whatever. And sometimes people do it on purpose. Those are middle schoolers. So sometimes they're trying to do stuff on purpose. Sometimes I will do stuff on purpose to make them fail at least once. So if I see that they're running through this activity too quickly and they're getting the hang of it, sometimes I will be a real stickler for the rules, which I usually am. Or I will, if there's any way that I can try to influence in a way that they don't recognize that I'm trying to make them fail at least once, that's what we'll do. And so, you can also, you can ask questions like, how do people continue to try after so many failures? When you think of the most successful people in the world, they fail over and over and over again. How do they get to be so successful? And you can get people kind of talking about that, or talking about maybe their own failures or things like that. So this is really a great technique to have a lot of fun, and to, but to have it, have a lot of meaning as well. If you look at the next slides, I used to run a family scouting group called Navigators. And so this was one of our first meetings where we did an activity that really embraced getting to know each other in the process of doing this activity where they had to figure out at the end how they could all have 2 feet inside this small circle. And so you start off with many circles, and 2 or 3 people in a circle, and then you ask a couple questions, getting to know you questions, and then you yank away a circle. And then they have to redistribute themselves and go over questions, and then you take away a circle until there's one left, and you don't think that you could possibly all fit in that circle. And all it is a matter of sitting down and putting your feet in the circle instead of everyone trying to crowd together, which is not recommended during COVID. But it's those types of things where you're like, oh, duh, Now I will never give I will never give a hint that that's how you do it. Someone will eventually figure it out. And so it's those kind of aha moments where it's like, oh, you thought it was impossible, but now you did it. What are the things do you think in your life are impossible that you don't even bother to try, that maybe you need to look at it a little bit differently? So there are tons of activities. And if you ever want to talk over any of this stuff, I'm going to put my, you have the PowerPoint, but my email is in the chat. I can't talk and type at the same time, obviously, but I'd be more than happy. I have, you know, tons of resources for you that if you are interested in dipping your toe in, I'd be more than happy to do this. We've done this. Actually, what in your organizations, what are some ways that you think you could use some of this?
Oh, sorry. So I head our council team, so that's we have interns that we're constantly sort of bringing in and trying to get to know, and some shorter term fellows, and then we have our full-time staff. And so it is a group that has, I think, kind of sometimes varying degrees of comfort with the team, getting to know each other. And so just thinking about those icebreakers that can kind of invite new members in, I think this could be a great way to capture some of that kind of team culture building work.
Definitely. And I have lots of ideas for you if you want to do something like that. I have things that can be 60 people. I've had things that, like, I remember when I was at the middle school, I think we had 80 or 90 staff people, I can't remember, and we did something that was so much fun and so unexpected, but then really was like, oh, okay, but I made sure the administration played along with everyone, because what you don't want is, you know, a lot of times the administration is the problem. And so, you know, they want to sit out here and watch how, you know, their staff fails. And I said, I will not do it unless administration is in the trenches with them. And it really did change relationships, specifically with this one assistant principal going forward. Oh, yes. So great. Any other ways that you might be able to, we have like 2 minutes left. Any other ways that you might be able to use this?
Yeah, we're always looking for, at the Brooklyn Bend Center and Benjamin Franklin High School, we're, you know, always promoting, you know, peer-to-peer relationship building. And so I definitely can see this as something to try out with our students.
Absolutely. It's really great with high schoolers because you need to catch them off guard, you know, and that's what this does. It's not some ladies coming in to talk about this or, you know, write a journal entry about this, but it gets them up and moving in surprising ways. And that can be really, really helpful. Great. And Jessica says in the chat that she'll use it for icebreaker type activities with young adults in her groups. Great. The way we use it quickly at BCCC is we go in and do classroom presentations specifically for first year students, because we have a whole thing about how, you know, what kinds of supports are here at the school, and we integrate it into this adventure-based activity. I've done it with athletic teams. I've done it for departmental meetings. I remember a couple of years ago, there was about 30 admissions staff, and they were not always getting along very well. And so I came in and did this really awesome activity that everyone really enjoyed. Orientations, and you can also even do it individually. Some things you can do individually, but it's really meant for more in a group. Also in the PowerPoint, you will see a couple of awesome books. So if you are looking for more activities, those books really are helpful to be able to figure out how to play the game, but then how to process the game. And if there's ever any game that you're thinking about, I mean, I've done like, I don't know, 50 or 75 different games, and you can always reach out to me and I'd be like, oh, watch out for this, or because they don't always tell you that, you know, they don't always say, oh, well, they're going to cheat on this one. And so you need to look for this XYZ. Jessica, I'll send it to you. In fact, I'm going to send everyone a PowerPoint. I'm also going to send everyone the processing questions that you can have. And I have a little packet that has different adventure-based activities. So this is just dipping your toe in saying, this might be something I could use. And then you can go forth and try to figure out, where do I go from here? Does anyone have any questions for Courtney or I?
I guess my question would be, and you may have said this at the beginning, I know you didn't intend for it to be virtual, but are there certain activities that you have found translate better virtually? I thought the one you did was good, but just curious because I still have a real combination.
Got you. The one that we did was the only one really that I could think of that would fit into it. Sometimes there's props like a hula hoop, or my favorite one has a tarp or paper plates, and it really is the interactive stuff. So today we did this one because, and I've done this one a million times in person, but it was the only one that I could think of that really might be able to fit, on Zoom. Other things that I've done is Kahoot games. So so for the first year college student class that everyone's required to take, that's the one I usually do with a tarp. It's amazing. But then I changed it into a Kahoot game, and everyone was just as engaged, but I wouldn't necessarily call it adventure-based. So yeah, sorry.
And I will say this would seem to work well virtually, because even though, in person you close your eyes, you still are able to be there and feel that energy. This year is super removed. Everybody's in their own space wherever across Baltimore. So you have no idea what someone else is thinking or anticipating doing. So I will say this one worked well online.
All right, well.
The tarp game, Angela, I forget what it's called. What's the name of it?
Minefield. Yeah. That one's amazing. That's my favorite one. I've done that at least 200 times here at BCCC. It's really gets the students talking about things that matter to them and brainstorming ways to make sure that they continue to be successful at BCCC. So Minefield is the name. If there's no more questions, I appreciate you hanging with us throughout the difficulties with technology and trying to do adventure-based things over Zoom. But please feel free to reach out to me. I love this stuff. So I would love to help you, kind of go over a game that you're thinking about doing. And Courtney, oh, sorry, go ahead, Sam. What were you going to say?
Oh, no, just saying thank you both.
Oh, sure. Courtney, you got everyone's emails?
Well, I think only Sam. Not if you have Maggie's already, and Jessica.
Should have Maggie's, and I think I have Jessica's too.
Okay, well, it was just Sam, so we have you down.
All right,
Angela, thank you so much, and Courtney, thank you.
Yes,
No
thank
problem.
you.
Thank you.
Good luck with everything. All right,
thanks, Angela. I will be in touch definitely.
Perfect.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot, ladies.
Yeah. Bye.